we're recording now. I'm going to introduce it by doing my best Christian Slater impression. Greetings and salutations. This is the Sticky Floor podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Today we have Callum.
How's it going?
And the new member, or not member, I guess I should say guest, is Blanka.
Woo! Hi.
Yeah, so right. Blanka's a philanthropist, an actor, a humanist, a Hungarian person. So what a pleasure it is for her to be here.
She's a jack of all
Thank you.
trades.
Thanks for having me.
So right. Simon's not here. She slept in, unfortunately.
They don't need to know that.
We carry on. So we're talking about scenes from a marriage, that Ingmar Bergman film. It was actually originally a television series, a limited television series, but that was made into a theatrical release, and I'm very happy that it has been because I fucking love this film. What about you guys? I'll go to you, Blanka, first.
Yeah. See, I kind of realized it's so cool to watch like movies with subtitles because it actually like forces you to sit down and connect with the movie, because I kind of realized that nowadays I just watch like moves and performances while I'm cooking and stuff like that. So I was really grateful when you sent me the link, and then I realized it's not going to be in English and there is no English dub on it, and I was just like, yeah, it literally forces me to sit down, and this movie requires to be like seated and actually focused. So I really loved it. I love the acting, obviously, but to be honest, I needed to pause it sometimes because it was too much. Like it's how many? It's 2 hours, almost 3, like 2 hours 40 minutes or something. So I needed to pause it and just like take a wee break between actually scenes, because sometimes it's too much because it's brilliant and I'm not used to it anymore, which is a shame, isn't it? So
it's incredibly dense. I think Callum was talking about that in a previous podcast about subtitles. Callum, what do you think of the film?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did think initially that it did seem like this is too long to tell this story. Like, I've watched films that are 3 hours, and that longest film I ever watched was 5 hours. But now that I know that, it's basically a condensed edit of a TV miniseries, that kind of makes sense. Although I do think it would be interesting to see it as a series, see what we missed. Because I kind of feel like a story like this told over a long period of time probably worked better in a miniseries format. So, but yeah, I really liked it. I love the performances. I thought I went through such emotions, like, not such emotions, like my feelings about the two main characters sort of changed constantly throughout it. There were at some points where I kind of really understood them and connected with them, and sometimes when I just outright hated them. Like, and I suppose that works. Like, that's the point. Like, your feelings about someone over the course of a long time can change. And that's how I felt about these characters, because, what is that, about 5-10 years it's sort of set over?
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that is one problem I had with it, and I've noticed this with a lot of films that are set over a long period of time. It wasn't always obvious how much time had passed between scenes. And obviously the actors don't physically age, and they still seem about the same age when they're throughout the whole film. So, but apart from that, I thought it was a stellar movie. Yeah.
Stellar is the right word. I love this film. I've seen quite a few Bergmans, but this was totally different. Just on all levels, it felt more, I guess, authentic. Well, and realistic, I guess the word, not authentic, but I loved how unobtrusive it felt. It felt like you really knew these people. There wasn't any, apart from a few crash zooms, there wasn't much movement with the camera, which I thought really put me in this relationship. But I guess we should just start with the first chapter, which is called
First of all, can you just tell them what it's... Maybe you should just briefly tell them what the film's actually about.
This film follows the story of Johan and Marianne, and it is about their 10 years after their first 10-year anniversary. And, you just follow them through their ups and downs. I don't know, is there anything else I should say about this, Cal? I mean...
I mean, if we're going through it chapter by chapter, I suppose we can come to the major plot points.
Cool.
I think it's worth to mention that Mariam is like played by Liv Ullmann and Johan is played by Erland Josefsson, because both of them are brilliant, I think, in the movie. And like as they are as artists, they're just brilliant.
Too right. Well, in that case, we'll start with chapter 1, which is called Innocence and Panic. The very first scene is them getting interviewed for a magazine, and it's just about how perfect of a couple they were. Talk me through, guys, what you thought about the way they were coming off and the introductions to the characters. What were your first, initial reactions to them?
Well, for me, I wasn't actually quite sure who was. I had a bit of issues with the subtitles. Just on this particular video we saw, there was a bit of delay with the subtitles.
Yeah.
So it wasn't always clear which subtitles were for which character. So in that initial scene, I actually thought they were talking, and I didn't realize it was the photographer off camera. I didn't really have any kind of expectations. I couldn't tell if there was trouble afoot. I got the sense that, they weren't being perfectly honest with each other when they were talking. Like, he was being a bit sort of jokey and sort of sarcastic, and she was being like, oh, I don't know. But then we got to the next scene and we saw how they were up against this couple that obviously have much more problems. So there's the kind of juxtaposition of, they seem like just a very nice couple and everybody sort of sings their praises. But, it's obvious that something's going to change and that it's not going to be like that for the rest of the film. Otherwise, it would be very boring.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was really smart to just, first of all, build them up as this perfect couple, which is so obviously fake, to then just have it brought back down to reality or what it's like. Or I don't actually know what it's like, but what I imagine a marriage would be like after 10 years.
I think it was like, especially the second half of the first act was quite interesting for me, because there's a contrast between the two couples, because in the second half we see Peter and Katarina, and obviously their marriage is like, it's just going down to the toilet, if I can say that. Like, literally it has ended, like, I think ages ago, and I think Bergman makes sure that we know that they are completely honestly hate each other. And there's a contrast between them and the couple like Marianne and Johan, because what I felt like, I kind of felt closer to Katerina and Peter. However, their marriage was bad. Like, they were shouting, they were fighting with each other, but it was honest. While Marianne's and Johan's relationship were just like on the surface. We didn't know, like I didn't know what's going on. It was just like, this is so uncomfortable for me to watch. And not the fighting, but them, how they don't react, how they just like two puppets, they just sit like there like this. And then I think it was brilliant. And also when Marianne reveals to Johan that she's pregnant and she winds up having an abortion, I think it's around the very end of it, and it's just, I think it hits the audience. It's just like, oh, okay, then something is actually happening with you guys, and yous are not that perfect couple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like very simply put in terms of there's like two types of couples in the world, and the first is the type that are just going to think everything's fine, everything's all right, and the second are the ones that are going to deal with it. I think Bergman kind of puts it to us that there's no really there's no really a correct way to deal with it, because either way it's just going to be very fucking difficult.
Yeah, sort of small detail, but it's also interesting to note that initial scene is the only time you actually see their children.
Yeah,
they don't actually say anything, so they're often mentioned throughout the film, but they don't actually play any major part in it, or any part in it at all, really.
Just the fact that this is a 3-hour-long movie, and he's able to keep your attention with just these two characters, really. I know there's obviously others, like 10 cast members maybe in the entire film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, incredible. I mean, anyone got anything else to say about this first one? I mean, I fucking loved Peter and what was her name again? Katrina?
Katrina.
Yeah. I thought just the way he writes that dialogue, it just like pops, you know. I think Bergman's one of my favourite dialogue writers just because everything he said, everything that the characters say, you could just hear an old married couple actually talking that way to each other.
Not that old, but
Oh yeah, middle-aged, sorry, all our middle-aged listeners.
I don't think this is actually the first work of Bergman's I've actually seen. I'd obviously heard of him. Is it he, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I've never seen anything by Ingmar Bergman before.
Have you, Blanka?
No.
No.
No, this was the first.
Tonally, it's so different to a lot of his other stuff. I would recommend a lot of his other stuff as well. I mean, anyone got anything else to say about this chapter, or should we move on to the beef?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, the whole thing, I must have been looking away because the whole thing about the abortion completely I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I actually rewatched the first scene because of the subtitle that you have just mentioned, that I wasn't sure what's going on. And first I thought it was because of the language barriers. I thought I was like, oh my God, I don't understand. But then I realized the subtitle is not like banging on time. So I rewatched it a wee bit slowly and a wee bit more careful. And for the second time, I realized, like, oh my God, she is talking about an abortion, and how genius it is to put this topic this smoothly into the conversation. I think it shows Marianne's character, like it tells a lot about her character, how she kind of doesn't even care about it. She just says it as a fact, like, yeah, abortion, because she wants her husband to be happy, not herself, and she doesn't care about how her body like reacts, how her emotions reacts, because it seems like she doesn't have any. But obviously she has a character development throughout the films.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she does seem to lack any sort of like, not integrity, I don't know if that's the right word, but throughout the film she becomes more and more out of shell, basically, as this emotional person. And it's kind of captured in the very first scene where she just talks about how she's got a family and she works, whereas the husband is very vocal for the very start.
Yeah, she her character changes the most throughout the film.
Yeah, I think they both fucking like change massively, to be honest. I mean, I guess we shouldn't jump ahead too much, but
yeah,
let's move into the second chapter then, where we do start to see a bit of change. This one's called The Art of Sweeping Matters Under the Rug. That starts out with the cancellation of a dinner party with the mother. I guess, why do you think this scene was put in there? I was having a bit of bother with this.
I suppose it was to highlight Marianne's. She's not very strong. Well, initially, anyway, she's not a very strong-willed character, and so she phones up her mum to sort of. I take it her mum was her mum in a home, because she was talking to some other woman who she wasn't on first name terms with when she answered the phone.
Yeah, looked like it. But she seemed to be quite wealthy, didn't she? She said they were middle class, so maybe it's just a maid.
Yeah.
I know it's more common in Sweden.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's the sort of highlight. We're supposed to touch upon their relationship with their parents, which doesn't actually seem like it's too bad initially.
Yeah, it seems pretty normal.
I mean, that's the thing. Everything we learn about these characters, we learn through them talking about it. We don't really see much of them interacting with other people. In fact, if I'm right, I think it's after the dinner party with Peter and, what was her name, Katriana?
Yep.
Katrina. We don't actually see them interact with anyone else, like, in scene, do we?
What, like any other characters past that point?
Oh no, apart from what's his name?
The scientist?
Yeah, apart from his colleague, apart from his colleague at his work, we don't actually see. I don't think we ever actually see any other characters on screen.
Well, we talk in that same chapter. Marianne also talks with the woman who is getting a divorce from her husband.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this kind of chapter is mainly just about the foreshadowing and the cracks in the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. That scene with the woman who is getting a divorce is basically like a big slap in Marian's face, and just saying like, this is what you should be doing. Talking about how she'd be so much happier if she was just separated and alone. I think that's probably why Marianne is kept balled up for so long. It's just because she is scared of being alone. There's a quote from that woman that is getting the divorce. It's something like the table. Table feels diminished and dry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When she was talking about how she can feel things, but she doesn't really see just basically everything's negative to her.
Yeah. I think it's like it's a really smart like start from Bergman to like, because he pushes his characters to slowly realize that without passion doesn't, like a marriage, a love doesn't quite matter, if you know what I mean. So obviously, because you can get along with people quite well, but it doesn't mean you need to be in a relationship with everybody. And I think that's what the elderly woman, if I can say that, says, that they had a happy life. Like they have beautiful children's, like the cottage in the countryside and blah 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 blah. And everyone just like thinks that. I thought that, they're just like, shit, good for you. Why do you want to just throw it away, everything? And then when she says the thing about the table, it just hits you like, oh yeah, like materialism is a thing, but it's not actually a good thing. Like, I think it's quite negative in this movie.
You also have to take in mind that this woman, she's also said that she's never actually loved her children.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's the thing when I needed to stop firstly the movie, and I was like,
yeah.
Because she's a mom. Like, it's for a woman. It's something else, like even saying that, like, how can you not love your children, that they are part of you? And obviously it's because I think she hasn't learned yet how to love anyone, because she lived without passion. So it's like, I don't know, it kind of makes sense, but it's a very, very hardcore thing to say.
Yeah, I think, well, that's kind of what I got from this character, is just she has kind of no joy in her life. She doesn't see the beauty in things. Everything is plain and ugly and dry.
When
I think... On you go.
All right, I was just going to say, when you were talking about how she doesn't love her children, that's like one of the main themes in the film that carries on to the very end scene where they're talking, where Marianne is literally saying, I don't think I've ever loved anyone.
Or been loved.
Or been loved, in that as well.
Or been loved. Yeah. And I think it's quite actually interesting in that scene when Johan is talking with his colleague, the woman, because the woman calls him mediocre for the first time in a movie, and obviously he gets upset. He is genuinely upset, and he mentions that there's a wee part when he mentions that there's somebody who appreciates my poetry, but we already know that he hasn't shown any of his work to Marianne. So this is like a wee clue when I think the audience kind of realizes for the first time, like, something is going on with this guy.
Yeah, can I just say one thing about that scene, which really kind of got up my nose? Even though it's just a small thing. When she comes in, she says, "Oh, I gave up smoking 6 days ago," and she's like, "Oh, go on, have a fag." Yeah. I realise attitudes to smoking in the 70s was a lot different. You could smoke everywhere, basically, but it's a bit of a dickish thing to do.
Yeah, straight pal.
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the book of poetry is really interesting because it seems like Johann is the one in the relationship who has the freedom and confidence to express himself and, make a piece of art. Then, of course, I'm jumping way ahead, so sorry about this, but then, of course, we hear Marianne's diary and her writing, which is fucking beautiful, but fucking Johann falls asleep. And
Yeah,
just kind of shows.
I actually laughed at that moment because it almost seemed like perfect comic timing. Like when it kind of pans out and he's asleep, and I just, like, funny in a sort of tragic way.
Yeah, the Jews like the. Actually, maybe I should ask this later about the diary. Yeah, but anything else from the scene with the man Johann and his colleague? I mean, I don't know. I could totally be guessing here, but there seemed to be like this kind of distaste toward each other. And I don't know why that was, but I could be totally reaching here. But I felt there was a little bit of distaste.
I don't know. I kind of felt like, again, I'd have to go. I only watched this once, and I'd have to go back and rewatch it. I felt like there was something between them. Like she understood him quite well.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, were his poems of a sexual nature, which I suppose was supposed to indicate that he had, I don't know, he wasn't quite, he was unsatisfied. Again, all these things.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that all these things are just initial, just to show that there are actually niggles in this relationship between his husband and wife.
Yeah, but later on in that scene, they actually, like, Marianne and Johann are actually talking about like the lack of the joy that they take in their sex life, if it makes sense. So there's a wee debate. Obviously, it ends with like a comforting conversation that they love each other and sex doesn't matter and blah blah blah. But I think sex actually matters a lot to both of them, but they're too scared to admit it to each other. And I think the sex like topic, the theme, flows in the movie quite smoothly, but quite importantly, because later on Marianne, in her piece of art, in her not poetry like diary piece, she talks about sex a lot and how she had like a different kind of point of view about sex and how it shifted later on, but we can talk about it later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mind just totally went blank there, but what you were saying was great. I'm trying. Remind me your point there, because it was the theme of sex. Sorry. Yeah, it seemed like from the beginning they introduced Bergman introduces these characters of having this wall, this exterior of happiness, but then pull back the curtain and they just don't know how to communicate with each other. That's like another big theme of the film is just the lack of true and honest communication. We can move on to the next chapter, guys, if anyone's got anything to say.
No. Even with all these kind of these sort of I suppose this foreshadowing, especially with the scene in the woman who wants a divorce, it kind of, this next scene sort of does sort of feel quite abrupt, but not in a bad way. Like, it's effective in how it comes out of nowhere, almost.
Yeah. Well, the next chapter is called Paula. So they're at the country house and Marianne's waiting for Johann and she's very happy upon his arrival, and then he breaks the news that he's fallen in love with someone else, a woman named Paula. Marianne takes this news and the further news that Johann's going to move out and move in with this woman, spend some time with her. She takes it in a really, on the one hand, it's incredibly
It takes
realistic.
it too well initially.
Yeah, but there's kind of, maybe we shouldn't, I don't want to go too personal into it, but I feel like that is a very realistic way to accept that kind of news, you know?
I mean, it depends on the individual who's being told the news. Like, obviously, some people would fly for their partner, especially, like, what really got me angry is I realise this is a very difficult thing to tell anybody, especially your other half, but the fact that he told her just the night before he was going to basically run off with this woman.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about him and the way he reacts to Marianne saying, "Stay with me," you know? The way he reacts to that instead of, he just gets angry, really.
I think that scene is so powerful and so painful. Like, I have never ever seen a scene about actually divorce and separation that was that powerful, because
Yeah.
I think, especially from Liv Ullmann, I feel like in the quiet moment she is also spectacular. She is mastering, like, not only the replication of like such precise feelings like anger and grief and love, and like these thoughts, but she acts like them clearly and so powerfully. So I think when it builds up to, like, obviously to that tension, when Johan starts to shout, it's just because of Marianne's, like, Liv's acting at the beginning, that quiet, small, taking it so well. That's why it hits so much. That's why the audience is like, whoa, why are you shouting? You don't need to shout. There are emotions already. Don't shout. So I felt like that. And also this need, when Marianne's need to be with Johan, like, I'm not sure, I don't want to be too personal here as well, but when someone loves somebody so much and so deeply, you tend to even beg to someone to stay. Like, you cannot help it. You just, like, in your brain, you just feel like, I need to save this relationship. And it doesn't matter if you afterwards you feel like you betrayed yourself, you betrayed the values that you set up for yourself, that don't back to anyone. Like, if you were cheated on, don't be nice. Like, these are natural things that people know, the audience know, but in Marianne's head, they just don't matter. Don't matter anymore. It's just, she just wants Johan to stay so bad and so painfully. It's just, I think it's painful and joyous to watch at the same time, which is really weird.
There is a sense that Bergman could have taken it in the way Hollywood would have taken it, which is like, Marianne gets angry and she's like, "Well, you fucking cheated on me, you fall in love with someone else," but he doesn't. He portrays it in this really naturalistic way, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, some women or men, doesn't really matter, would react like that. The anger would come out immediately. But that isn't Marianne's character. That's not her. That's not where her instincts lie. And it's sad to watch because you kind of think, no, no, girl, don't beg. You should be angry at him, right?
Yeah, and especially when they almost have sex. I was shouting. I was just like, no, you don't do this. You don't. Obviously, because, like, nowadays, like, feminism and it's so strong and so empowered and stuff like that. And, like, in 2020, watching this, it's just like, it begs for shouting from women, from all the women, like, no, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. Yeah, but there should be a sentence from Johan when actually he starts shouting, and then he says, "We have never talked like this before," and there's a be like comforting sound in his voice, like, "Oh, I can let everything go now, and I can be honest with you." And I think that's brilliant, because when he says that, there's kind of love in his eyes. When he says it, it's like, I can finally be honest with you. And it's nice, but obviously it's nice for 1 second, and then you continue just hating him.
Yeah. It seems like Johan, he starts to open up and change at this point. I think it takes Marianne a bit longer to catch on. Oh, you're going to say, sorry, Callum.
Yeah, the bit where he says, I'm trying to be honest with you, but it's hard. And obviously he doesn't have the right to be angry at her. Well, to be honest, once we get later down the film and we can see, okay, they're both quite flawed people, and it's understand why they would rub each other the wrong way, the way they do. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It is hard to open up to someone, especially even if it's someone you're incredibly close to and you love. Like, a lot of the time, we're always trying to give the best, we're trying to present the best version of ourselves. And then when you really want to admit, actually, no, you're not this way, you want to be perceived, you're just, you've got all this pent up, whether it is repression or anger or, or you just feel like, I don't know, there's so much to unpack here with this, and this kind of comes out more later on in the film, but yeah, as much as you shouldn't be angry of her, it is very difficult to open up to people.
Yeah.
It can be.
Yeah. Paula, the person that Johan's fallen in love with, seems more like a symbol than an actual human being. It's kind of a symbol of their faded love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in fact, we should talk about that. And because Paula's only, 23?
At
that time, yeah.
Yeah, so, and he's presumably, if he hasn't had, he's 41 by this point. So, and even says, she's been through a lot of divorces, she cheats on people, and this bothers me. But it's kind of interesting. Sorry, go on.
No,
that's fine. I was kind of done.
No, it's so interesting that he admits to Marianne that he is a wee bit jealous of like Paula's other affairs, like not the life she lives basically, but kind of, yeah. And also the thing is, after what Marianne says, like, she doesn't care that Johan is jealous, Johan is in love. She just asks to see a photo of Paula, and it's just such a like, not like the thing that you wait from a character who was just told that she has been cheated on and stuff like that. But I think that shows how Marianne attached to Johan, like how deeply she is attached to Johan, because she says that I cannot compete just with my imagination. You need to show me a picture just to see who is my kind of enemy.
Yeah, it's fucking insane, like how accurate that is. I know I've already used that word, but the same exact thing would happen, but with Instagram today.
Yeah.
But like, right, who's this person?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I suppose, one thing that kind of dates, because I was sort of thinking, you know what, you could tell the story and it could be set today and it could still be the same. But I realise now, what with technology and social media, I mean, their personalities and their behaviour is not really that different. But apart from just things like technology, that's the only really thing that would change. But, the story just shows how well it kind of holds up.
Yeah, timeless.
Yeah. But the thing that Johan says that, he's just sick of all this kind of keeping up appearances, people's birthdays, what will our mum, what will our parents think, what will our friends think, this, that, and the other. And basically, he just wants to get away from everything and live with this younger, more, how would I describe her?
Vibrant.
Vibrant, maybe less introverted woman. I mean, as much as I can, although it's not something I would do, well, I hope not, I've never been in his position, I can understand the feeling of wanting to get away with everything, but the difference is they have children together. Like, because I know people whose partners have just up and left and cut all ties with them. And it's understandable if you don't love someone, but if there's children in the mix, you can't really do that. I mean, you have that choice, but really is it really is not a nice thing to do. I know I'm kind of underselling that point,
but he clearly doesn't think of the children of Marianne as a family anymore, like, because he said that I set up an account for you guys, so you will have money, I'll pay whatever I can to support you. And he genuinely thinks that's enough. Like, he thinks that, okay, I'm a good man because I did that. I provide financial support to my family. And he doesn't seem to even realize that this is not what matters. Obviously it does, but like, this is not the point that Marianne was trying to say to him, like, what about the children? What should I tell them? Things like that. He doesn't even understand. And he is not bothered to understand either.
Yeah, well, I mean, because he furnishes that sort of rant, that diatribe, saying, look, I just want to dematerialize. And I'm sure at one point before he leaves and before she hangs on to him, when she says, what should I tell the children? Should I tell him you've just gone? And he's like, yeah, tell him that.
6 months later, the Vale of Tears, and Johan and Marianne meet up again after they're splitting up. Starting off with this one, guys, what do you think about the different character dynamics?
It was, I suppose this is where we really get under the skin of Marianne as a character. And we also kind of see that Johan is, I mean, like a lot of long-term couples who split up, there's still this, even if they don't want all the pressures and everything else that comes with a relationship, they still want the comforts. So he comes back and he still wants to sleep with her. And so does she him, but she kind of wisely said, when he starts to make a pass at her, she wisely just sort of pushes him off, saying, you know, I've been thinking about you. I've not stopped thinking about you. And if you do this, you know, if we do this, I'm just going to miss you more, basically.
Yeah, I guess
Just going to pine for you more.
For the listeners, just if anyone's just to catch up, Marianne at this point knows that Johan is actually no longer with Paula. However, Johan has made Marianne believe that they're still together.
No, they are still together, aren't they?
No, the night. So
later on he mentions that he is still with Paula.
Yeah, but Marianne received a letter. Now he gets a letter, and next morning he reads it, and it's about how Paula has actually moved to London.
Yeah, we're jumping ahead a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that's why Marianne doesn't sleep with him.
It's not the only reason, but
yeah,
that hasn't been revealed in the scene up until that point.
Yeah.
I kind of love how Marianne starts with full energy, like just she really intends to show Johan that she's moving on. Like she is obviously like easygoing, they are laughing and stuff like that. So it seems like there is no hard feelings at the beginning, and I feel like it's always like that, isn't it? Again, I don't want to be too personal, but when you actually break up with someone and then you get to meet him, her, whatever, and the next time you like just devoted to show them like I'm alright without you, like hey, and then that's what Marianne does on her own way, and I think it's adorable. But then when Johan starts being more and more personal and more intimate with Marianne, obviously she breaks down. And I think it's a very, very nice moment of the movie when she refuses to have sex with Johan because she says that it is going to mean something to me, and I don't want to put myself back into that position where I was without you, and I hate you every day what you did to me, but I still love you and I still want you. And it's like these kind of contrasting feelings. It's just so precisely shown in the movie. I think it's in a way it's lovely. I know it sounds grotesque, but in a way it's lovely for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sex between the two, the point you made about how it would mean like it's such a different thing to both characters. It's, on the one hand, it'd be catastrophic for Marianne to do that, but for Johan, I mean, I've got to say, actually, I think for Johan, it probably, although it wouldn't mean as much, probably would still mean quite a lot, because I mean, sex with your ex is still a huge thing.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of both show signs of that throughout the film.
Yeah.
because when you kind of think that they've kind of moved on, they sort of, again, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but they really haven't. Yeah, so I suppose we should talk about her diary.
I guess so. So at this point, Marianne has started taking note of her feelings, and she reads a diary excerpt to Johan, and this is one of the biggest points in the movies, I would say. Marianne reads from her diary, and it's such an eloquent and beautiful, excerpt. But I'm going to summarize it in a very simplistic way, just to say that she tells us tells herself the type of person that she is. And it's so symbolic that Johan falls asleep during this point, because it is just like a snap of like, okay, I'm gonna fucking change now, because I've been dealing with all your shit in this entire life, your rudeness, fucking falling asleep while I'm trying to express myself. Now I'm gonna take control of my life. I think that's a turning point for Marianne.
Yeah, well, he did say it was the wine. Can make you sleepy. Yeah, I mean, what we really kind of learn from this, and what she says, is that she's basically, her problem is she's too agreeable. She worries about what other people think too much. She's constantly wanting to please other people and kind of not taking her own. Well, here's the one thing I kind of disagreed with that. I've often met people say, I've always done this and I've never considered this. That's probably bollocks. She probably has thought about her own happiness and what she wants at certain points, but the desire to please other people has always overwritten it. But to say that she never has, I'd probably be a bit skeptical of that.
Yeah, I agree. To an extent, yeah.
I think it's not. I'm not saying I disagree, because I see your point. I just think, from my point of view, people actually, it takes loads of courage, yeah, to break out from the role that you were assigned to. You know what I mean? Like, if you were raised as a child in a sense that you're gonna be a mother, you're gonna be a housewife, it takes courage to say, no, I don't want to do these things, or I don't want to do these things in a way that I am supposed to do them, because of the pressure of the society, the pressure of my husband, and la la la. So I genuinely think that she didn't think about breaking free or about her own happiness, because she was forced to believe that this is happiness. And I think throughout her psychiatric, she's not on medication, she just attends sessions with a psychiatric something. I think this is the point when she realizes that I was told to do stuff and I did them, and oh my god, Jesus, you know.
She's a lawyer as well, which is something, that her father, I could be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure she says at some point in the film her father was a lawyer himself and wanted her to become one too.
Yeah.
And she wanted to be an actress. I think it's funny how Johan says in the second scene that Marianne is not interested in poetry. And in this scene, 2 scenes later, basically, Marianne actually, it's not a poem, but it's a piece of art that she shows to Johan. And then she tells him that I wanted to be an actress. They were married for almost 10 years. And Johan doesn't know that Marianne wanted to be an actress. And she is actually interested in poetry. Of course she is. Anyway, I think it just tells much about Johan's character and how he didn't care about it all. He didn't care about Marianne. He just cared about his own happiness. And I think that changes throughout the movie, especially towards the ending.
I mean, in all fairness, I get the impression that she wouldn't have told him anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Just, I guess, on a point you made earlier, I guess the one thing that I found myself reacting and sympathizing much more with Marianne's character, but I feel like that's because I'm more like her as a person, and I feel
Adore
that
my
obviously yeah, exactly, mate. That's fucking how I feel every day. But the Johan character as well, I feel like I've met so many people exactly like Johan as well.
Yeah, I mean, without going into too much detail, I can relate to both of them in different ways.
What one more so, if you don't mind me asking?
That's a hard question. I mean, the main difference is that my life isn't like theirs. You know, I'm
Yeah.
not married and I'm not in a long-term relationship, and I don't have the sort of same pressures and commitments that they do. But I mean, the main problem with both characters is that they don't know what they want, or they do, but they don't know even how to express that to themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it can take years, it can take a whole lifetime to work yourself out. It comes easier to some people, but you know, I'm 29 and I'm still learning things about myself. Well, actually, no, not so much, but even in the last few years, I've learned things about myself that I didn't even realize, or I did know, but I couldn't quite articulate it in my own head.
Yeah. It feels like Marianne and Johan both want the same thing, but they just don't know how to communicate that and don't know how to. They don't really know if what they want is the same thing as each other, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's I mean, we learn more about this in the next few scenes, but yeah, I think the next chapter is probably, unless you have anything to add, Blanka.
Yeah, I was just wondering about why you guys were talking about that you can relate to both of the characters. I can as well. I was just wondering about loads of people say that it's not enough to be in love to make a relationship work. And I think this scene is actually the example of it. Like, because we can clearly see that they care about each other, they attach to each other. I'm not saying deeply love, but they are in some kind of love. But it doesn't mean that this relationship is healthy and it works out, because in the process when they like realizing what they want from the life, it's just actually like just it's a two-way thingy for them. So what they want, both of them want happiness, but in a different way, and
Yeah.
they cannot like mix these ways, if it makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. It does take a lot. It's more than just being in love to make a relationship work. You know, there's all kinds of other things. You have to be reliable. You have to be sort of committed. You have to sort of be able to put things aside or put up with each other's faults, which,
Yeah,
you know,
but there's a fine line, I think, between giving up yourself completely, but be true to yourself, but still working on the relationship. And I think it's kind of interesting how this couple, after 10 years, still haven't found this line. Like, they still just jumping between giving themselves up completely in the moment, and then at the other moment they're just like, no, I want this, I want that, because it's my life, you know. So they don't completely still know, but they have been married. So I think it's just, for me, it's a wee bit scary. Like, oh my God, I thought, because when you're a kid, you think like, when I'm gonna be an adult, probably I'm gonna do these things right, and I'm going to know everything. But you actually don't know everything, and it
no,
just scares me.
you kind of realize that you knew fuck all when you were 18, and you think you couldn't be told anything. Yeah, it does kind of beg the question why it took 10 years for this all to come out. I mean, one thing that they constantly say is like, you know, we got on so well. Because even in the very first scene, when they're asking about how they got together, it's like they were with someone else. They were actually, when they met, they were with other people, and then she had a baby which died, and her relationship with whoever she was fell apart, and she was about 19 or something. And his relationship went sour as well, and then they just sort of met up, and then they found out they got on really well, and that's the whole thing they keep saying is how much they get on with each other. So it's kind of interesting.
They seem...
Sorry, go on, Daniel.
Well, yeah, I was just going to add to your point. They seem in some ways polar opposites, but then they both have this one personality trait, which has been able to put up this facade of everything's okay, we're in a happy marriage.
Yeah, and that's not unique. I mean, everybody does that. Well, doesn't necessarily have to be in a marriage, but everybody wants to keep up appearances, you know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just to move on slightly, Johan does trying to do that exact thing when he's talking about Paula and his relationship. Then obviously we find out that Marianne has received a letter from Paula saying that Johan will try to tell you that we're in a relationship, but we definitely are not.
All right, is this the scene where the letter?
Yes.
Okay. I think I must have missed something about that because I'm kind of misremembering how it's being described. I think you should probably take it from there.
Yeah, so just on that, I guess, Blanka, what did you think about that scene? Because to me, it kind of seemed like Johan was, you know, the way he's been acting for the past 10 years is catching up to him now that he's not lying, now that he's not with Marianne, you know? He can't get away with that anymore.
Yeah, I think he kind of acted like a child when you like when you do some naughty thing as a child and your parents tell you like you shouldn't do that, we have seen what you've done and you did that and that's wrong, and you obviously you're angry and you're just like why I thought I'm gonna get away with it. I think it's the same in Johan. I think he feels a wee bit betrayed because both of the women know that Johan is not with anyone, but he was still trying to keep this image of himself. I was just wondering while I was watching it, like, does he really believe in this image? And is he lying himself as well? Or is he just lying to the two women? What do you think?
That's a good question. I don't really know how to answer that.
Because we tend to tell ourselves things that they're not there. We tend to build this image about ourselves just to make ourselves better, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think that's what Johan did. Like, basically, he didn't want to purposefully lie to Marianne to hurt her or to Paula to hurt her. I think he just wanted to keep his image as perfect as it can be.
Yeah, that's
and
a great
I think
point.
This is the first time when he realizes that I lost. I completely lost. First time in my life. I don't have any women. I don't have my life. I don't have my family. And I think this is the point when the audience like starts to realizing that maybe he wants to be back.
I think it's the point where the audience, Marianne and Johan, all realise that he's full of shit. Especially Marianne, because after it just kind of starts to disintegrate after he falls asleep during that diary reading. Then we find about this about him. Then I guess we should move on to the next chapter, where
He started to disintegrate when he told her he was seeing another woman.
I don't think so. But do you guys?
That's the first time they ever get heat. That's the first time that's when the tone. I mean, I realise we've just covered that chapter, but that's the actual point where the tone of the film really changes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But Johan's like descent into depression, or maybe not depression isn't the right word, but his descent doesn't really start until, you know, all these layers are pulled back from his image. But I guess we should go into what this was definitely my favourite segment of the movie. It was phenomenal is the word to use. The illiterates it's called, and that's the signing of the divorce papers. This is the chapter of the film where they both really just let loose and express their hatred for each other. Blanka, what do you think, Blanka?
Me. Um, I think loads of things. I'm just trying to kind of minimalize them.
I didn't give you a good question there, sorry.
No, that's all right. I think it's nice how different the two characters are at this point. Like you can see a balanced, healthy Marianne, an actual happy Marianne, and a depressed, total like just I don't want to say loser, but a wee bit loser
Yeah.
Johan. And how Johan still wants to be in the marriage, but he doesn't want to admit it, and how Marianne wants to just move on quickly. And I think for me, the most beautiful part of this scene was when they had sex, and then Marianne said to Johan that I wanted to have sex with you just to see if I still have feelings. And in contrast with the previous scene, she couldn't have sex with him because she hasn't moved on yet. But in this scene, this shows that she has moved on, not completely, but like 90% of her moving on has completed because she can have sex and she can walk away, like she can continue with her life, while Johan, who's supposed to be like the strong independent one, he cannot even sign the papers without beating up her ex-wife. Like I think that shows how I think at this point I pitied more Johan than Marianne, but Marianne was beaten up, but I felt bad for Johan, not Marianne, which is I think interesting.
Yeah, it definitely sort of shows the change in dynamic, that it's at this point that we see he's actually the weaker character than she was up until this point. Just to kind of go back, so they sign the papers and then they have sex. One bit I'm kind of forgetting is after they do so, she's angry at him, and that's what starts the heatedness of this scene.
No, the thing is that he signs the paper like the very end of the scene, so he beats up Marianne and then signs the paper. So
But
he
I mean,
has so they have sex before he signs the divorce paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. What I was saying is, you know, they're in the office and then they decide just to have a drink, and then they start having sex. And then once they get up, then they start arguing, and he's saying, "What are you angry at me for?" And I'm just trying to remember what it was that sort of changed. What is it that made her angry at him? Daniel, do you remember?
Well, I think it was more to do with Johan's attitude after the sex, and just the way her genuine feelings towards him at this point. I mean, she can express herself
What was his
now
attitude?
that she's kind of. He was just being a dick, like he always is, putting up that false persona.
Yeah.
And he clearly didn't want to sign the papers, but he didn't tell Marianne, so he was trying to postpone the whole signing process with like small talk. And I think it made Marianne angry because they had sex. Marianne realized she moved on completely, and then this fucking dick still doesn't sign the papers. You know, it just angers you immediately. Like, what are you waiting for? You know.
Yeah, I think it also shows the fact that they were both in similar situations where Johan and Marianne could have had sex when Marianne hadn't fully moved on and she decided not to do it. But then the man, in this case Johan, that is in a similar situation and he ends up having sex, which I think is a very accurate portrayal of what it's like. Obviously not totally,
And she also,
not generalised.
and she also mentions that, you know, she's, I don't know if this point is she's engaged to her other lover. Look at the time. Yeah, because they have this big argument and it all kind of comes out. And then this is the time where she really gets everything off her chest. Like, this kind of scene mirrors the way Paul just went off at her after he tells her that he's leaving her.
Paul,
sorry. What's his name? Johan.
all right.
I got Paul from. Paul.
Looks like
He
Paul.
does look like Paul. Do you know what I thought he looked like? I don't know if you will know this actor. I'm trying to think. You know that actor Elliot Gould? He's probably best. He's
Elliot
probably
Gold.
best known for playing Monica, Ross and Monica's dad in Friends, but he's
Oh,
been in
Yeah.
loads of other things.
The Long Goodbye.
Uh,
Jinky, look at him.
I think he was also in American History X.
Elliot Gold.
Yeah, he's been in loads of stuff.
Yeah, he's in.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just
I
it's more
don't
the
really.
curly hair than anything. But yeah,
Yeah.
Hmm. The another interesting fact about this, by the way, that we've not even brought up. Liv Ullmann's actually was married to Ingmar Bergman, during this filming process. They were husband and wife at this point, and it felt kind of to me, although they were married, it did feel more like to me, especially in this scene and the scene after, it was more like Bergman was having a conversation with himself more than anyone else, because he's got these two different people. Probably both personalities are in him, and he's just trying to figure out how he's going to coexist with in a marriage when he's got these both toxic personality traits.
yeah. Yeah, that's just. I mean, I know it's an overused term, but that is the point. This relationship is toxic, but they're still so dependent on each other, and I suppose that's most clear with the final chapter. But we should probably talk about how it actually escalates, because this scene was when they actually get violent with each other. Well, Paul instigates it. Johan instigates it, obviously. Where he kind of gets angry and he locks the door and he won't let her leave.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, on a technical level, what's interesting about the scene is that kind of wide shot with him sitting on the coffee table and her on the chair.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really nicely framed shot, but I'd kind of thought that the office was actually a lot smaller than that, because we only really see them sitting.
That is a great point. I thought the exact same thing. It felt so constrained.
Yeah, so pokey and cramped. And then when
Yeah.
we see them actually sitting and that across from each other in that wide shot, it feels like a much bigger room.
Masterclass, yeah. Absolutely brilliant. I guess we should, because we are running quite late here, let's just talk about this chapter then. Let's just get to the juicy bit, which is Johan beating fucking Marianne. For me, that came from a place of jealousy and, in a way, grief
And insecurity.
for his past self. Yeah, sure. It felt like now he's been totally exposed for what he is.
Yeah.
Which is someone who's false, and he's had sex, and now Marianne has fully seen him and for what he actually is, and it's pathetic. So he decides that the only way he can get back at her is by actually hitting her.
Yeah, I mean, because he admits before this that, he doesn't love Paula and he feels lonely and he wants to come home. And he even says that I'd rather be alone on my own than alone with Paula, and I hate them both. I mean, yeah, that's his main problem is he thinks he wants this, but then he doesn't want it, and then he does want it, and then that's just a running thing. They don't know what they want, and sometimes, and even if they did know, they don't quite know how to express it to themselves. And then it just comes out in this big ugly rage.
But at the same time, Marianne hits Johan as well. I'm not saying obviously because Marianne is a woman, Johan is a man.
Mm-hmm.
Johan shouldn't use his actual physical power over Marianne. But I kind of felt like, obviously, Marianne is beaten more worse than, you know what I mean, more worse than Johan is, but still there's an aggression in Marianne's actions as well. So I think that
he hits her first, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
I think he does. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, I would probably hit back as well. Self-defense, your pride, stuff like that. But I don't know. I just feel like for me, it wasn't, and I'm a woman, but it wasn't just a one-way domestic abuse towards Marianne. It was bad and it was hurtful to watch. This is my opinion, just. But at the same time, I felt like she stood up and she started to hit back. Like she started to actually beat in her own way Johan as well, which doesn't give the right to Johan to continue the beating and kicking and stuff like that. I just feel like when it is an actual really bad one-way domestic relationship, the woman just suffers from the beating and the man don't get beat. The man doesn't get beaten.
I mean, I would say on that point, she definitely expresses her hatred through verbal abuse. I'm just saying, fucking, I hate you. I hate sex we have. I hate the past 10 years we've spent together.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the next chapter, guys?
Yeah.
Has anyone got in?
I just want to add a couple of things.
Yep.
First thing on a technical level, because that was mostly shot. I'll have to admit, like some of those punches, he obviously wasn't hitting her. Just his arms were moving too slowly, like he was in slow motion. So there was obviously no weight in those blows.
Yeah.
What I kind of thought is probably most realistic in this scene, because this is the only time they're ever like this, and I'm assuming, and it's the first time they've ever been like this in terms of this sort of physical. He insults her. I mean, he already has struck her at this point, but he insults her and she loses the rag and flies for him. And then they just both go at it until it's at the point where she's on the ground and he's kicking her. And then finally she says, and then you can tell by the end that he actually completely regrets what he's done. And then she says to him, "Can I have the keys now, please?" And he gives them to her and he signs the paper and then he leaves. He kind of realizes he's gone too far and he complies.
God, okay. Last chapter, in the dead of the night in the dark house. It is in this chapter we find Marianne and your man Johan. They end up going to a cottage house, or the country house rather. Marianne's married by this point. I believe Johan is alone, and this is kind of just the whole combination of the movie come together, and it's kind of, the way I took it was Bergman's opinion on marriage, whether or not it's going to work and how to make it work. Callum.
I mean, the thing is, not everybody's relationship is going to be the same. So,
yeah.
And these are people with two very specific hang-ups. Well, actually, not that unspecific, but so there's going to be people whose marriage is completely different from theirs. So, wait, are you saying you think this is his statement on the institution of marriage?
Not the institution, but the way he perceives his own marriage and how he's going to deal with it. It did seem like that ending was, because it could have easily just had them have another argument or whatever, but
yeah,
it seemed rather optimistic.
We'll go into the detail, but my kind of takeaway from just this whole scene is they can't be together, but they still love each other and they're still emotionally dependent on each other. And, it's not healthy that they keep coming back to each other. And it seems like basically the plan is to carry on having some kind of affair on their respective spouses.
That's what you took from it, Blanka. What about you?
I think, first of all, I think Johan has a wife as well.
Yeah, that's pretty sure.
I think because Marianne asks him, "How is your wife?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The last scene is so weird for me. I was actually wondering about if this scene, is in chronological order. I was wondering about, is it a scene when they met, or is it the scene after the divorce? I wasn't sure. Obviously, then when it goes on, it makes sure that this is after the divorce. But when it starts with all the happiness, how they talk in the car, I was just like,
Yeah,
what?
that is such a good point, because it did feel like a honeymoon phase that they were on, and I guess
Yeah.
that was coming from them being separated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think what I would like to talk about is the dream of Marianne at the end of it, that she doesn't have arms and she wants Johan to hold on to her and the kids, but she doesn't have arms to hold on. I think that's so bang on. Like, this is actually the story of almost a 3-hour movie in a
Yeah.
nutshell. That she wants him to hold on to her, but she doesn't have the arms. They don't have, not that kind of emotional connection, because they do have some kind of emotional connection, but they don't have the patience, the ability to communicate with each other to make this marriage work. And it's just so sad, and it kind of reminds, I think, the audience to their life. Like, it's just, sometimes you need to let go things to make them work, if it makes sense. Sometimes you need to just not force stuff. You just need to be in the moment and not want things to happen. And it's so hard not to want things. And I think this is a great example that they gave up on the perfection of the marriage. They gave up on each other and found each other again. And I think it's beautiful, even though they beat each other up at the previous scene, but they still, I think it's just beautiful.
Yes, well, I'll just comment on that. Sorry, Callum, before you were going to say something there. Just on the previous point about what I was saying about how they were so happy at the start, that's totally contrasted, because in the previous chapter, literally 2 seconds ago, you're watching Johan beat up Marianne. So, of course, you're going to think, is this, right after? Like, are you sure? But, so this is 10 years.
It's years apart since that scene.
Yeah, exactly. So this is now 10 years after their 10-year anniversary. I think it's funny that we're all taking kind of different meanings from what that ending really means. What struck out to me, and it kind of seems like this is what Marianne and both Jan and Marianne were both battling with throughout the entire film, is this loneliness and this needing someone to hold you. And it was again what was brought up in the dream. It just seems like there's a genuine feeling of this. You just have to be loved to be happy, and sometimes that maybe it is all you need. In the words of the Beatles. Sorry.
You beat me to it. I think one thing that's one of the more noticeable things, this is where we see the most change in Johan, where I can't quite remember how he put it, but he's kind of just, he's not as angry as he was. He's not as, what's the word? I'm trying to think. What?
Fucked up.
Well, he's kind of just, it's like it's sort of like he's accepted his lot in life.
Yeah.
And so he's just kind of...
There is a quote that Marianne says, Carol, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's exactly what you're saying. She basically says, "You're so small now, and I love you so much more for that." I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
He's not so tensed up. He's not as frustrated as he was, because he's just kind of like, I mean, what is he, 45? Although he was 41 at the beginning.
He is 43 at the beginning, isn't he?
I thought he was 41.
41? Then he's definitely over his 50s then.
Yeah.
Because it's 10 years later. So either he's 51 or 53 or 55. So between that.
Yeah. So he's kind of just, like I said, he's accepted his lot in life. And that's the other thing. Marianne, I had it in my head right there. It was something about her. I think you come back to me. You guys say some stuff, because I was about to say something.
Just to correct my quote, I found the actual quote, and it was, "You're so small, you're so much handsomer this way. And yeah, that's kind of like Bergman's, you know, overly masculine side, or at least that's what I took from it. And that's just
What do you
not,
mean?
just admitting that, you know, maybe you're not all these things that you say you are in this interview for this magazine 10 years ago, when you're saying, I'm a great lover, I'm strong, I'm independent, I'm a great dad, I'm a great husband. He's listing off
Wasn't he
all
saying
these.
that in a jokey way, but
Did you just take it as a jokey way? I took it in a way of he is like
I thought
really.
he was kind of I thought he was kind of being sort of deliberately kind of up himself in a kind of sardonic way,
Do you think so?
like he was being ironic, like
Was he?
yeah,
I didn't
like
take that.
jokingly. He was like
Yeah,
jokingly. He was jokingly blowing smoke up his own arse. He wasn't actually blowing smoke up his own arse.
I think maybe, but if this was a Scottish film, I would think that. But I think Swedish people are different in that sense, that they are
Yeah.
just able to say these things about themselves that are like, you know, we are great, whereas Scottish people can't do that.
Yeah, they're just
Like,
different.
Do you think that's correct?
I have no
yeah.
idea. I don't know that many Swedish people. I've never been there.
What about like in Hungary, the Hungarian people, you know, Blanka, are they the same? Can they say like, oh, we're great at this, we're great at this, the way Scottish people can't?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Especially because I feel like in Eastern Europe nowadays as well. Those back in the days in 1974, 73, when this film was made, people like they were completely not honest about themselves, and if they were in front of somebody, if they needed to like give an interview or just like talk about themselves in front of a stranger, they talk themselves up and just up and just up, because the common sense, I think, is that you need to be perfect because your life is perfect and you're great and stuff like that. I'm not sure if so you don't think it's the same with Scottish people?
No, I feel like well, at least personal experience, I find stuff like interviews incredibly difficult because I need to say, oh, I'm this candid person, I'm a hard worker, blah blah blah. I hate giving myself compliments.
Yeah, but it's not. Well, that's not to do with you being Scottish. I realise there's this kind of Scottish cultural trait that isn't what it was, what it used to be. Like, don't big yourself up. We don't like people who boast. Success is vulgar, blah de blah de blah. It's not really like that anymore. Like, you know what I
I think
mean?
so.
Like with anything else, everything's a bit more materialistic. We've all turned American.
Sure, I agree with that. To an extent, though, I still think there's like like quite a big part of the Scottish population still does feel uncomfortable saying stuff like that, and you wouldn't get someone saying the things that Johan says in the first interview. I don't think.
Yeah, but like I says, he's saying that in a he's kind of just, he's not being like, he's not literally saying, oh, I'm this, I'm that. He's joking.
I think he is.
Yeah.
Blanket, settle
Uh,
this for us.
I'm not sure anymore. I don't know. I just
It
feel
would,
like
no, I think,
obviously.
look, surely it would, in a sort of middle class setting, it would be terribly vulgar just to big yourself up like that, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of feels too much. Obviously, neither Hungarian nor any nation does that like on purpose. You know what I mean? So it's just so unnatural to speak about yourself that highly. You know, I think I'm not sure if he meant it or not, but I think it's a great, like, this is a moment of the movie when you need to laugh because it's so uncomfortable that you need to actually like ha,
Yeah,
what are you doing?
he
Huh?
does say, like, in his speech about how great he is, he says he's got a great sense of humor. Surely, like, he would have a wee chuckle after that because he's just saying all this stuff. That's why I think maybe he is being serious.
No, like, if you said, like, you know what I mean, he says, I'm a great lover, like,
I think he's being
not really,
serious.
yeah, I mean, that's not really, well, he's obviously not it's obviously neither of them are great lovers, or
Mhm.
they don't know how to please each other anyway, initially.
Yeah,
I feel like we're getting hung up on this point a bit too much.
yeah,
Like, 'cause we're still,
Yeah.
definitely.
I
I
think
mean,
my whole takeaway just from the scene is that even though they should move on, they can't move on, and they probably can't connect with their other people like they can with each other, even though they're not good for each other. So it's like they're kind of stuck in this rut together. They're kind of like, no one else will have them. Well, other people will have them because they're both married, but
yeah, it does leave it open ended as to what they're going to do with their lives.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's not unrealistic. I mean, people do come back to each other because there's still that kind of comfort, you know.
Yep.
Plenty of people have went back to their ex when they're feeling vulnerable or they're feeling alone, which is probably not a good thing because they might enjoy the comfort of the evening, but they'll wake up and want to be completely apart from each other again. And then it just keeps going in this circle. I mean, my personal opinion is like, and I obviously realise that it doesn't always go this way, but I think as soon as it gets to the point where one of you feels the need to raise your hands to the other one, you should probably just go your separate ways.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
I mean, they would still have to communicate because they have children together, and they can probably put that behind us and they could still be friends. But yeah, like, it was
Yeah,
quite...
but at the same time, oh, sorry, on you.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, it is quite a sad story. Like, even though they kind of have this understanding about each other and themselves because they're kind of gone old and wise and realise that they're both incredibly flawed people, but they're not. It doesn't mean they're not completely. Because, like she says, like, you know, I feel like I've never loved and I've never been loved. And he says, okay, you're being histrionic, which, and he admits, you know, we love each other in our own fucked up way. You know, they're kind of like Jerry. They're kind of like what are they called? It's like Mark and Jeremy from Peep Show, in a kind of weird way. You never watched Peep Show?
Nah, not a television.
Watch Peep
Nah.
Show.
Yeah.
Watch Peep Show. If you've got Netflix, it's on Netflix, it's on 4OD, watch Peep Show. Or you can just stream it off of Daily Motion or something. It's the best sitcom this country's ever produced, apart from the last two series.
Well, I guess we should go for final thoughts then, guys. Who'd like to go first?
I think it's a very sad but very good sort of, how can I put this? It's a really brilliant character study of two very complex and also very flawed people, but very believable people. So yeah, I'd recommend it, even if, you know, although you could watch it in chunks.
Yeah. I mean, the television series is like 5 hours, so that would be pretty fucking amazing to watch. But Blanka, what are you thinking?
I think it makes you think. This movie actually makes you think. It wasn't made for entertainment, I feel like. Obviously part of it, but it actually a piece of art which makes you think, and I think that is what great about it. For me, the story, like the whole movie, is just working kind of simultaneously on two galaxies, if it makes sense. Like on one level everything is like grounded and real, and on the other level there's like series of concepts like kind of composed to the last detail, and everything is just has kind of an endless interpretation, if you know what I mean. So you can go and on and on and on about everything for hours about this movie, and I think it's great. That's why we make art.
Yeah, that's
so I would recommend it.
Yeah, great summation from the both of you. I'm tempted to call it a masterpiece. I think it is. I think it's a masterpiece. I think personally, I've struggled with this idea, although I'm only 20, this idea in the future. What am I going to do? Am I really going to stay with this one person for the rest of my life? Because does this feel like, you know, you don't want to be supremely lonely, but you also probably don't want to be with one person for the rest of your life. That's just something I struggle with personally, right? Probably, you know, it's in Bergman
that might
kind
change
of...
that in the future.
Say that again, sorry?
That might change in the future.
Yeah, of course. However, at the time I'm watching it now, it gives me this kind of optimism with the fact that they do fall asleep together and they're holding each other in their arms. But that's all I've got to say. All right, I guess we should wrap up. Thanks to Blanka for being here. Thanks to Callum also for being here. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, hasta la vista.
Yeah.